Hello Horror Hounds, today's Italian zombie movie, like so many of its brethren, comes with a plethora of titles. It's called Virus, it's called Hell of the Living Dead. Here in the UK, it's known as Zombie Creeping Flesh. It's from 1980, and it's directed by Bruno Mattei and written by Claudio Fragrasso. And hang on, where have I heard those names before? Just a moment. You've got Claudio, Bruno. Oh, bugger. When I said a few videos back that we were going to be doing a short run of reviews of Italian zombie movies from the 70s and 80s, one of you lovely viewers, JLB Zombie, commented quite innocently enough, I presume you're going to be including Zombie Creeping Flesh. And I'd never seen it, never heard of it. So I thought I'd get the Blu-ray and include it in the mix. So I have JLB Zombie to thank for the experience of watching the worst film I have ever seen in my entire life. So good one, JLB Zombie. Good one. In all seriousness, JLB Zombie, I know it's not your fault. You didn't have a hand in making this movie. But I'm a petty man, so I'm going to blame you nonetheless. The film opens at a nuclear reactor-looking facility in Papua New Guinea called the Hope Centre, where a team of scientists are working on what they call Operation Sweet Death. Seriously. Naturally, it all goes wrong. A dangerous gas is released which turns the technicians and locals into zombies. A French news reporter and her crew land on the island to investigate, whilst an elite special forces squad of bozos have also been sent there to cover up the evidence of the deadly accident as well as the sinister purpose behind the Hope Centre. Soldiers and journalists teaming up to survive the zombie threat. Where have I heard that before? We'll never know. Did I mention that this was a bad movie? You will marvel at the ineptitude from both ends of the camera. One of the first questions I asked myself was, why does a four-man elite commando squad need two jokers in the pack? It's like the A-Team had decided to swap out Hannibal Smith for a second howling Mad Murdoch. I also asked myself whether an elite commando would have a Sonny Bono haircut. All these questions, and many more, will roll around the inside of your skull like socks in a tumble dryer. But let's stick with Santoro for a few moments more, for that is the name of our jokester SWAT team member. He's like Klaus Kinski, but with Howard from the Big Bang Theory's haircut. And at least I'll give him this, he's an interesting actor to watch for all his tomfoolery. He's the one who works out that in order to kill the zombies you need to shoot them in the head, and he demonstrates this to his colleagues who are busy blasting rounds and rounds and rounds into the chests of the slowly oncoming zombies. He says, no guys, look, you need to shoot them in the head, like this, and the zombie goes down. And when I say he demonstrates it to his team, he does. 3 times. 3 times. Then he gets bored with this and decides to have a little more fun with the undead, and he gets up close and personal with them. He gets in amongst a group of 8 of them and plays a sort of weird game of catch me if you can. Ooh, you can't get me, you can't get me. I have a feeling that Bruno Mattei favoured free-form expression rather than choreography for the action, or even any form of preparation. That might account for the fact that the poor zombies, clearly prohibited from killing Zantano because the script says he has to survive the encounter, are left to pathetically brush their hands across his cheeks and systematically fail to grab him and make a meal of him. He plays this game of peekaboo with them twice in the film, and I turned to my girlfriend and asked her how we could be expected to find these zombies threatening when we've essentially watched an unarmed character just hanging out with a group of them for about 5 minutes. And if you get bored with the film, don't worry, because it's padded out with bits from other films. The score by Goblin, proudly displayed over the opening credits, as you would if Goblin had scored your movie, is actually bits of music that Goblin wrote for other films that Mattei had got the rights to and used. And it's not just the music. If you get bored with what Mattei is showing you, don't worry, because often he will cut to stock footage, wildlife footage, footage of creatures in the jungle, to really hammer home the fact that they're in the jungle. In the middle of a conversation scene, whilst a character is talking, you will cut to a slow motion shot, completely different film stock, a completely different grain, slow motion footage of a monkey jumping from one tree slowly to another and then back to catch the end of the scintillating sentence that one of our characters is espousing. And what of the other part of this mismatched team of heroes, the journalists? You have a cameraman whose name completely eludes me, who's clearly besotted with his muse, the journalist Leah, played by Margaret Evelyn Newton. She finds herself on the trail of a story of a lifetime in Papua New Guinea to investigate the reports of tribal violence and cannibalism. She traces it back to its source at the Hope Centre and the big secret of the movie. Leah's character is a tricky one because she swings wildly back and forth between an empowered female figure, a real go-getter, and a screaming frozen damsel in distress there to be rescued and indeed exploited, because in a microcosm of this dichotomy, in her character's one big moment, her time to shine and take control, she is simultaneously in charge and completely exploited by the movie. Her big moment comes when the group needs to pass through a native village. Leah warns the commandos that the natives are on the verge of panic and it would be a mistake for them to all blunder their way through. She's spent a year with this tribe, living with them and earning their trust, so she convinces them that she is the only one who can barter their passage through the village. She sets out alone, telling them not to follow. Give me an hour on my own and then come after me. This woman gets things done. By which I mean she strips down to a leafy G-string, paints her body with kindergarten tribal patterns and goes bouncing down the road towards the tribe. Any brief titillation, and I'm no prude, she is a beautiful, beautiful woman, but any brief titillation is undone by the aggressive insertion now of more stock footage, this time stock anthropological footage, to try and persuade the viewer that she is interacting with real Papua native tribe. It gives this section of the film a cannibal movie aesthetic, by which I mean it becomes increasingly uncomfortable to watch and increasingly exploitative. We see actual footage of a tribal burial process taking place, sourced from an older documentary, which means seeing real dead bodies that aren't in the best of conditions being carried around. It leaves a very unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. Then more footage is cut completely out of context to make it look like a tribal mother holding an infant is eating flesh from a rotting human head. There's documentary footage of the woman eating rice, presumably, using her fingertips, then cut to a close-up of a hand picking maggots off a rotting human head, back to the footage of the native woman eating her food, berries, whatnot, to make it look like she's eating maggots off a corpse. It's reprehensible. This is all the more flabbergasting because clearly Fragrasso and Mattei think that they are making a movie that champions the rights of third world countries against the first world industrial complex. At the end of the film, we discover, spoilers, that the intention of Operation Sweet Death is to curb third world population explosions by driving them to prey upon and cannibalize one another. It showcases the ineffectual nature of the United Nations in a sort of tragi-comic sequence where a representative of New Guinea is making an impassioned case to get aid to his country, and the handful of otherworldly delegates around him aren't listening and are acting more like children than grown-ups. How do you balance that out against a film that consistently depicts the third world inhabitants as mud-smeared cannibal natives, or wave after wave of shambling brown people designed to be something for the white soldiers to blow away? Eventually we come across some white zombified folks, so I don't want to beat this drum particularly hard. It's just frustrating when the only attempt to infuse proceedings with any kind of artistry or intellectual endeavour or something to say is fudged beyond all comprehension, just like every other aspect of this diabolical mess. Zombie Creeping Flesh gained an altogether unearned level of notoriety by being included in the Department of Public Prosecution and BBFC's Video Nasty list, effectively getting it banned in the 80s. I will temper the terrible time I had trudging through this hot pot of garbage with this thought. Imagine being a horror fan in the UK during that time of nonsensical censorship, keen to get your hands on these lurid titles which are threatening the very fabric of our good society. When somebody please think of the children. Imagine paying an exorbitant price to get a black market VHS copy of Zombie Creeping Flesh, and that which came with the risk of prosecution, the risk of imprisonment. Then imagine getting home, sliding the tape into the VCR, hitting play and settling back to watch, well, this.